That means wake up. Got to be lulled to sleep by this. Seriously, these are some of the things that we felt were the salient points that really make the school stand out. I was asked earlier, okay, what makes the school unique? Well, many things, but here are the things that really impressed us, to use more layman's terms. The school effectively articulates its vision and purpose to stakeholders. I mean, that's ever present around us. I mean, that's very apparent. Not only in the printed material, but in the various publications throughout the school internally. In other words, everywhere you see evidence of a clearly articulated vision, mission statement with goals, organizational descriptors, and more to the point, the stakeholders know them. And not only do they know them, but they understand them. So very, very effective, very impressive. Also, we were quite impressed with the organizational climate as a whole. And of course, giving special credit, leadership must have its just desserts. It starts at the top. Dr. Ghazali is to be commended for the climate that he has put in place, the climate that he has facilitated, which is one of collaboration, candor, and transparency. Stakeholders talk to one another. Stakeholders have input. Stakeholders work together here. And stakeholders do like to acknowledge the good things about the organization, but they're also very candid about identifying areas for improvement. And I love the term that we had, it came up several times in conversation, transparency. There's nothing to hide here. Certainly we're interested in you're interested in projecting a positive image, but this is not promotional. This is analytical. This is about looking at where the school is at this point in time. More importantly, looking at that in the context of where it wants to go in the future, specifically 5 years hence. And also something we were highly impressed with was the analysis of organizational and student performance, which is data-driven. In other words, very, very skillful job of taking data points that are basically, as your organizational statement says, they're student-focused, results-oriented, and very, very data-driven. These points of analysis are used to communicate to individual students, but also to the stakeholders that are concerned with continuous improvement and looking at ways that the school can get better. In other words, the school understands where group markers rise and fall, analyzed across grade levels, and to do a very, very impressive job of that. Here are the required actions. Now, this is where the homework comes in. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And lest anyone be under the misapprehension, there's no surprise here to any of the school's leadership. We come up with these tentative conclusions, but we also discuss them at length with the school's leadership to make sure that we're on the right track here. And we've done that in a very, very due diligence manner. So this isn't any surprise to the school's leadership. Our first job, if you will, that we are helping the school frame is to create a framework for driving professional development which balances administrative and teacher input and which structures expectations, delivery systems, and priorities. Now that's a lot. I've been accused of being rather fond of talking before and being a little verbose, and I admit to that as a charge, but there's a lot to encompass here within that one sentence, and I want to talk about it a little bit if I may. In other words, professional development is going on in this school. There's no doubt about that. But it seems to be going on in a highly systemic manner. In other words, stakeholders are very interested in growing professionally. But there's not a recognized structure to manage it, to analyze it, to make decision. It kind of seems to find its own level, almost lurching forward, which is much better than it not being there at all. But it's lacks a systematic feature that it might have with more work and more focus. Highly systemic, not as systematic as perhaps it might be, and there's some work to be done in that. administrators typically will have a real strong opinion about what they feel that its learning organization needs in the way of professional development. But it's teachers who really understand their learning needs, and there must be a balance for teachers to weigh in and to communicate in that collaborative environment with administration as to what their needs are. And there needs to be a system which structures the expectations. In other words, there is an implied expectation for professional development, but there's not a systematic expectation where teachers are required, not just expected to, but maybe even use the word required. I've actually used that distinction sometimes semantically to get myself out of a tough jam. Well, it's expected, but not required. And there is a difference, and it is. In other words, we expect you to do this, but we can't make you. Now, we're suggesting the school might move to the next step and saying, no, this is not just expected, it's required, because it's that important to the organization. So there needs to be a structure that facilitates in a clear manner just what the expectations for professional development are. Delivery systems as well. Okay, how are you going to deliver professional development? Are we going to invite people in to have a seminar? Are we going to send people out? Are we going to go online? To what extent is it going to be campus-wide in terms of staff development? To what extent is it going to be individual professional development? To what extent are we going to talk about content? To what extent are we going to talk about pedagogy? To what extent are we going to talk about learning theory? To what extent might we talk about integrating, the Quranic virtues and whole ethos into the learning process? There's just lots to be decided there. And then, with that in mind, priorities. What are you going to look at first, and what are you going to look at second, and how does that sequence seem logical and kind of build on itself? So there's a lot there with professional development that I think the school can focus on and really take it to the next level, if you will. Does that make any sense to stakeholders? At this time, I might entertain, because this is so important. Here again, we're transparent as well. If anyone has any questions, I would field them or entertain them at this time on that.
Thank you. I think it's very important element that we need at this time.
Okay, then we'll move on to the next one. The second one is to structure the process of admission, review, and dismissal of students. Now, this is very, very straight and to the point. But when we talk about the admissions, review, and dismissal, we are talking about a process that sometimes operates as kind of an acronym in a public school called the ARD committee. And it's a structure, it's a protocol that is designed specifically to address students who have been identified under the Individual Disability Education Act as having a need, some condition that needs to be addressed by a public school that accepts federal funds. There's no such requirement for a private school. In other words, you're under no formal obligation to operate within that structure. But there's a moral imperative. There's still that ethic of trying to deliver what the student needs. You're a very student-focused organization. And when students are identified as needing a specific service, whether that's ESL, English language learners, whether that relates to learning disabilities, whether that relates to some kind of social, emotional issue, or perhaps a physical issue such as hyperactivity or impulsivity or something of that nature, then the school really has kind of that moral obligation to respond. The school is doing that, is doing a commendable job of responding to those needs. But occasionally there comes that point where after that intervention, if you will, has been suggested, there may or may not be the requisite follow-through on the part of the parents, where it drives the question of, okay, we're trying to work with you and work with this student, but maybe we're not quite communicating as well as perhaps we should. And maybe there needs to be a structured process where we talk about the conditions under which we might admit a student in the first place, if we have evidence that might lead to the conclusion that they have a need that might not be served here, or if there's a pattern of behavior, whether that could be behavior or anything else where there's a concern about whether or not the student can be served here any longer, or whether you come to the point and said, this really is not a good organizational fit, we may need to look at disenrolling a student. Those are important things, and when you get to that point, there needs to be a structure to guide it to avoid the appearance of it being arbitrary, capricious, or in bad faith. In other words, it needs to be policy structure driven, and it certainly is under the ARD process, and it certainly is under any kind of suspension or expulsion process in a public school. There needs to be a structure to gird that should that situation arise. Any questions?
I think that's going to help us in our line when we did the placement test now that we're struggling with what we're going to do with the data that we collected. So I guess that's what the help is going to come in.
Could be a big part of that. And there are lots of different things that the school might do under that whole framework of just of structuring that process. There's so many things to pay attention to in starting a school, sustaining a school, and then driving it to continuous improvement. That's where hopefully we might serve a valuable function in coming in from an outside perspective and say, you're doing a real good job here, here's something that needs a little more work. For what it's worth, from our perspective, that's where we feel some work can be done. The third is to focus the long-term strategic plan on the transition to K-12. Now, you have a strategic plan in place. It's not a highly developed plan, but it's a plan nevertheless. But the plan is fairly all-encompassing, and a lot of it focuses simply on the building. The physical plant. Now that's appropriate because as your school grows, you have to grow the facility to accommodate it. But there also needs to be a focus that that rivets attention to the myriad of problems that lie in wait as you slowly transition from an online curriculum to a more traditional curriculum and instructional delivery system to become a K-12 school. In other words, becoming a high school involves a lot. And it's going to be incumbent upon the school to anticipate, to the degree that it can, what those challenges might be and be ahead of the curve rather than being reactive to it. That's, I guess, the best, most succinct way to say that. Any questions on that?
Thank you. I think that's in line with what we...
Yeah, that's what we... Year by year, that's what...
Exactly. These required actions, to some extent, are driven by what we see as needs, but it doesn't mean we don't mean it to suggest that work is not being done there. We just say this is where the focus needs to continue. Okay. Now, the school standard rubrics that we work with, they go from the bottom to the top, not so good to so-so to okay to pretty good to highly functional. I'm sorry, I'm throwing my synonyms in there. The print there is too small to read, and I'm not going to take the time to read the exact descriptors, but I do think it's important to zero in on the top two levels of assessment, highly functional and operational. This is where the deliberations come in, where we just try to tease out the difference between those, and sometimes the difference is very, very, very subtle, and we finally just have to make a qualitative judgment. Okay, we're going to land here, because we have 56 indicators. They're organized within 7 standards, so there's a lot of information to take into account. The only thing that really is very, very instrumental in terms of level assessment at this point in time is any standard that is either emerging or non-evident. Okay, if any of those things fall into place, then there are different levels of accreditation that are involved. Now, I apologize for the format here, and I don't know why that stands out. I have this is not my program, okay? But sooner or later, we're going to get a, yeah, there you go. This is how it kind of fleshes out. Now, is that, wait a minute.
You don't have that right.
No, wait a second.
There's another highly functional in there.
Yes, and it is, I'm sorry, okay.
got it wrong.
Well, that's all right, but I will correct it, but for the record, and I'm speaking here to the camera, Standard 6, stakeholder communications and relations are highly functional.
Yeah.
So,
Take the change.
yeah, it didn't take the change. So what happens here is basically, here's what I'm saying. Okay, we won't discuss each one of these in any detail here because that will be done in the report. But very briefly, as we've mentioned in the in the commendations, highly functional vision and purpose, governance and leadership, many good things happening in that regard. Not as a negative, but it's a process. There is still kind of in the process of working how the school functions with the board of trustees, with the community as a whole. There's more work to be done there, but it's still at a good level. The teaching and learning, the same thing. Documenting and using results, you're ahead of the curve on that. Resources and support system, it's fine. Nothing, that is substandard. Here again, I apologize. Stakeholder communications and relationships, that is highly functional. Very responsive to community expectations. Commitment to continuous improvement is operational only insofar as there's more work to be done. The commitment itself is definitely there. There's just some structure that needs to be provided. Now, the important thing is with the distribution, okay, I'm sorry for that. It's a 3-4 split at the top with no emerging and no not evident, which means that pause for dramatic effect. We are going to forward a recommendation for accreditation. Now, just thank you for that moment of drama. Had there been levels that were emerging or not evident, we could have, based on that distribution, either gone accredited on advisement, like an asterisk. Okay, we'll let you in, but we have an asterisk in there. Warned, which is if one of those is not evident, like I said, okay, we'll let you in this time, but we're not too comfortable with this. Probation, it's almost like baseball. If you have 1 not evident, you're warned. 2 not evident, you're on probation. 3 strikes, you're out. 3 not evident, you're denied accreditation or you're dropped. But we will now forward a recommendation for accreditation based on the evidence that we will use, that we've used to generate the report. We will give that to the State Council that will review the report, that will forward it on to Advanced Ed Accreditation Commission, and it is the body that grants the terms of accreditation. Now, here's the good news. By virtue of the fact that you are doing this in mid-May, if I can push through with due diligence and get this, and I will, get this sent in, because I have to, in a timely manner, it will be reviewed next month in Georgia. And you should be receiving a letter by no later probably than midsummer that says you are officially accredited. Now you can communicate. You can communicate. I mean, we're keeping no secrets here, but outside of light applause, probably no more celebration needs to happen until it's official. But when you get the letter, no holds barred. You can use the logos, you can use the information that is provided there as part of the accreditation process, and you're fully accredited. But it's now just a matter of reviewing the report. So the final thoughts are that on behalf of the team that I have, for purposes of time, not formally introduced, but I do thank them for their efforts. I thank the school, all those people who held very key roles in making this whole thing happen. We convey our appreciation for your hospitality, your support, your professionalism, our respect and acknowledgement of the dedicated staff, and our congratulations to you for completing this quality assurance review process. And we believe in the power to transform. And that completes our oral report. Congratulations once again. Do you have any questions? You're sitting there in this kind of the glow of, it's nice. It's kind of sometimes difficult to wrap your head around, isn't it? Like, oh, what does this mean? Well, you're going to find out. It's good. But we do extend our appreciation and have to say that we're highly impressed with what the school has been able to do in such a short period of time. That's what's important.
It is.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It is.
Well, on behalf of Yusuf Quran Academy and on behalf of the staff and the parents and the stakeholders, I'd like to thank Dr. May and the team, Jane, Nathan, and Bree for their help and support. Definitely it was an exciting experience for all of us over here, and your help is very much appreciated.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Didn't have enough dessert, so we have a little bit of dessert for you, and I'd like Hisham, I will
Oh, wow.
share a land of the
Aren't you glad you didn't leave early?
Well, let me just take also this opportunity. Thank you for the committee to come and spend those 2 days with us. I think this is valuable information and feedback. Really hitting the nails here. And let me take this opportunity to thank Dr. Hamid and all of our dedicated staff. You guys deserve it. I think it's very clear from the recommendation, the amount of commitment and the hard work that the staff of the school is doing for our children here. So congratulations and thank you all.
Thank you. And I just have to explain to you that Dr. May, first time he came here, really was very helpful and supportive of helping us get this done. And putting the pressure on you is actually credit goes to him because he was really also pushing me to do it and encouraged me to do it. So I really thank him. And
I did it for a reason.
closely, and,
That is correct.
It was a wonderful experience, learning experience for me. So I really thank him, and I hope we'll continue. the work.
Absolutely, we will. You know that.
Also, we might seek help from him and Nathan and others to come and help us, sometimes in our growth and implementing these recommendations, inshallah. When I say inshallah, I mean God willing. So. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time.
Thank you.
Nathan, thank you. It was nice meeting with you. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us all the
Okay,
tools
Mrs.
you've
Lee,
given us.
thank you very
I'm sorry?
much.
All the tools
Appreciate
you've
your
given us to
time.
work.
Well, I hope so, and we can have a follow-up discussion as needed. And we're all in the same business of improving
Please take a
education.
group picture, please.